I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're in Mi'kma'ki, the unceded ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We also acknowledge the contribution of people of African heritage in Nova Scotia for more than 400 years. We pay tribute to and are grateful to our ancestors who came before us to make sure our history is not forgotten. And now, on behalf of Volunteer Nova Scotia and the King's Volunteer Resource Center, welcome to Volunteer Screening with presenter Alex Cherry. I want to thank Alex for joining us on such short notice. She specializes, in helping nonprofits grow their volunteer programs, ensuring they're sustainable, supportive, and thoughtful. She has extensive experience in large-scale event management, notably with the 2023 North American Indigenous Games, Nocturne Art at Night, and Sail GP. Welcome, Alex. The screen is yours.
Thank you so much for such a warm welcome, Heather. And for everybody who's here, thank you so much for making time on your wonderful there's just like some background noise. Making, time on such a beautiful day, or at least it is where I am based in Halifax. So I'm so happy to be here with all of you. So this is me. So again, that's me on a better hair day. But yes, I do consulting, as Heather said, with nonprofits. I specialize in volunteer strategy as well as doing strategic facilitation to ensure that you're meeting your goals or to build strategy as well as event planning. So before we get started, I would love to, us to get to know each other quickly. If you could share your name, the organization you're with, and what your drink order is when you go to order something. So I'll start by myself. I love a London Fog. It's such a little treat. And that's something I love to get while it's still cold out. So I will pass it over, name the person you're going to pass it to. Heather, not Heather from KVRC, but there's another Heather here. I'll pass it on to you so you can introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you, Alex. Thank you. My name is Heather Hemming, and I'm with an organization called Grief Matters. You can find us at griefmatters.ca, and we're all about improving, building, expanding grief literacy because everyone experiences loss and everyone is grieving. So I'm really delighted to be part of this webinar this evening, and I'd say my drink order is pretty well consistently an Americano black. I love a really good blend of coffee, and I like it really hot and really strong. I'm going to throw this now to Betty Kemp.
Hello, I'm Betty Kemp, as you've said. My favorite coffee is a Tim Hortons medium with 3 milk. Very not very exciting, I suppose, but it is my favorite, and that's what I go to. Each day I have one. So I will pass it along to Sandy.
What organization are you with, Betty?
Oh, sorry. I'm with the North Dartmouth Outreach Resource Center. We are a food bank.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah. I'm Sam Schwartz. I work with Betty in our same food bank, North Dartmouth Outreach Resource Center food bank. We are located in 44 Hester Street in Dartmouth, and we are open to our clients every week on Wednesdays. We're open today. And typically we get about 87 households coming to our food bank, and we provide them with the grocery style food bank. Basically, we don't have any kitchen, or we don't serve any hot meals or anything like that. Okay, Michelle.
Hi. I don't have a favorite coffee. I drink tea, which is mainly green.
Great. And which organization are you with, Michelle?
I'm not with an organization. I'm just learning about Volunteer Nova Scotia right now.
Okay, that's fantastic. You can choose somebody else here who hasn't spoken yet.
And I've got a lot of feedback on my iPad right now, so it's really scratchy from your end.
All right, maybe we'll go to Teresa.
Hi, I'm with Survivors of Abuse Recovery, and it is Nova Scotia based. Their main office really is in Kentville. That's where it started. And now we are spreading across Nova Scotia and getting our organization known provincially. And I've been with them since 2022. And my favorite go-to is hot chocolate.
That is a Hallmark movie choice. I love it. All right, who would you like to send it to next? All right, you're on mute.
I forgot that part. I'm sorry. I don't. Rihanna.
Hi, I am Olena, Nova Scotia Resettlement Society and Nova Horizons, Operation Center Nova Horizons. We support people affected by war and the natural disaster. And we support people from 10 countries. And I love latte. And
Oh, latte?
it's at home. Yes.
Thank you so much. Who do we? So we have Tracy and Stacy, who I think have not introduced themselves yet. Tracy, would you like to introduce yourself? All right, or Stacy, would you like to introduce yourself to the group?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Stacy Gomez with the Center for Migrant Worker Rights, Nova Scotia. And I like a cappuccino. Thanks.
Very classy. All right, so I always find that's like a fun way, instead of telling you to say like share a fun fact or have us all connect. This way, I'm forcing you to tell me a wholesome thing about yourself. So for an overall agenda, so we did our introductions. While we are talking about screening, there will be some information about what is the status of your volunteer program. What does volunteer screening mean to you? Why do we screen volunteers? Then trying to define what is overreach, aligning your values in action, reconsidering assessments, some alternate methods, and some takeaway conclusions. So it is a little bit more interactive. So I will be asking people to either chat in person or write in the chat for different questions. And if you want to even have some paper in front of you to figure out some of these things, if you do have some bigger questions, that way you can have it there for yourself. Also, I didn't realize there was so much animation with what I had chosen on Canva. So you can answer in the chat, but I would love to know for everyone here, for those of you we have so many different organizations. So Stacy with the Migrant Workers' Rights, we have Grief Matters, North Dartmouth Family Outreach Center, Survivors of Abuse, New Horizons. These are like very varied organizations. You have varied things, but I would love to know, are you your volunteer program manager, or is it just a part of your job? And you can just
Hi, Alex. Sorry, can you hear me now? This is Tracy. I was trying to get my microphone working and it was not.
Okay. A belated introduction for Tracy.
Yeah, sorry about that. I am the meal and volunteer coordinator with Halifax Meals on Wheels. And just very quickly, or any black coffee, bougie, if it's flavored, that works as well. And like I said, sorry for the late introduction, but I was fighting with my phone.
All right, so that's fantastic. Thanks so much, Tracy. So I'll invite everybody now, if you can put in the chat if you can, or if you cannot work the chat, you can say it verbally. Are you a volunteer program manager, or is managing volunteers just a part of one of your many tasks?
Do we just speak up?
You can either speak up, put it in, or put it in the chat.
Okay. So
Yeah, so I
essentially,
see so far one of many tasks, which this is just a quick answer. Yeah, part of
yeah,
overall tasks. What about you, Teresa?
one of many tasks. Yes.
All right. Basically recruiting and training all volunteers. So yeah, that's a lot. So it seems like there's only one person so far that is the manager of the volunteer program. So yes, you'll like truly volunteer management is, and this is something all of you know, usually in smaller nonprofits becomes a part of one of the many things you have to do with service delivery, with liaising with different staff, ensuring that you're getting grants, ensuring you're doing so many things. But it does take a lot of skill to be able to manage and run a program efficiently and appropriately. So you don't need to answer this, but detailed wise, but again, is it a long running program? Do you feel like it's well established? Like, so the status of your volunteer program, you can say if it feels healthy to you, if it's something that you're working on, if it is something that you want to improve the status of your program, the level of engagement. You can share that if you want to, or you can just share that for yourself in your notes of like where your program is at currently. Because as we know, there are waves when it comes to there's periods of recruitment, there's periods of training, there's periods where you have a lot of great base of volunteers. So this is like the status of your program. This is like an answer you can keep to yourself if you don't want to share that widely, of how you're doing with your volunteers right now. So that's even something to keep in mind when we're thinking about screening processes. So for this can even be for yourself, what are your current roadblocks or sticking points with your overall program? So what is the most frustrating part of your program currently? And does your program have any guiding values or principles? So that might be of how you approach things, how you want to approach it. Do you want it to be valuing equity? Do you want it to be valuing empathy? Do you want it to like what are the way that you approach your work and that you approach your volunteers and also aligning it with the mission of your organization? I see some of you writing, so I'll give you 30 seconds there to think about it. And I promise this will come back when it comes to screening. And you might not have a guiding principle of how you're approaching it other than it's necessary and you're doing your best, but you might have a word or a way that you want it to be, it might be like high impact, it might be connection. So thinking about what you want that word to be both for yourself and for your program. So at a very high level, before we get into the details of the volunteer cycle. So this is what you might express to your colleagues. This is what you might express to your board. So this is like the very, very high level that screening is a part of. So you have a needs analysis before you do recruitment. You're like, okay, we need people with X skills. Maybe for, as you're talking, the North Dartmouth Outreach Center, you need people who are good at lifting things, who can move things around, and who are good with people on Wednesday, you said you're open to the public? The 1 day a week. You need people available at a certain time who can lift and move things and be front facing. Maybe you first those who are for Teresa, who's with survivors of abuse, you need people with empathy, or maybe you need people with grant writing, whatever it is. You decide what you're looking for with volunteers, you do recruitment, you screen those volunteers who have applied, and then do onboarding and the recognition for once they've become engaged volunteers. So this is like very high level, but that's what everyone sees. But what you're also doing is ensuring you have the right policies, making sure you have organizational support, that you have enough time to do all of these tasks. And then the same thing of screening, I put evaluation. It's an evaluation of the people who are applying, evaluation of like the roles that you have, and it's overall resource management and planning for attrition. Because even though we have a lot of people who might come to us with goodwill and good energy, they might not be able to stay on as long as we would like them to. So this is like almost the under second layer of the volunteer cycle that might be harder to verbalize when you're speaking to other people on your team. Okay, Sandra just joined us. Okay, I will say Sam's thing for when I asked about the values. This is a minute ago, to be compassionate, understanding, and generous in our efforts and the highest level of service to support our clients. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sam. So volunteer screening. So when we think of that overall cycle, I would like you to share with me, not just share me, sorry. Share with me, and again, it can be verbally or it can be in a chat. Why do you do volunteer screening and who is it for? And again, there's no wrong answers. There's just in your organization, why do you do it? And within the context of your organization, who is it for?
Hi there, Tracy here. One
Hi.
part of our screening is we do a criminal record check and a vulnerable sector check with all of our volunteers, as well as, I mean, there's things, most of our volunteers have to have a driver's license and all those kinds of necessary screening tools. But for us, especially the vulnerable sector check, we're dealing with, our clients are a lot of elderly people, a lot of disabled people. So basically, we're doing our screening to protect our clients.
Okay, that's a fantastic answer. Thank you so much, Tracy. I see Heather is putting to protect vulnerable people who engage with our organization. Great. Are there any other answers? To ensure volunteers are trauma informed. Okay, Teresa, I would love to hear a little bit more of how you ensure that they're trauma informed.
Whoops. Oh, I thought I lost you there for a minute. So when we go through our screening process, there's different questions that we ask on their level of comfort with talking about the subject matters that we do deal with. And we work with adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse. So in that trauma-informed process, we do make sure they have their criminal record check with the vulnerable sector check. And our peer supporters are also survivors, so they can relate, and they go through our training, which is trauma-informed training as well. And that ensures that not only are our peer supporters safe, but our peer clients are safe and well taken care of while they're in our services.
Okay, that's fantastic. Betty, we have you rely on personal references, and
Yes.
I think who are those for?
These would be for volunteers that work at our food bank.
Mm-hmm.
We would rely when they usually come to us referred by another worker at the food bank, and if there's somebody that they have known well, and we would rely on what that volunteer has told us about this individual.
And why do you do personal references?
Well, we want to make sure, as Sam has said, that we get the right volunteer that's going to treat our clients with compassion and confidentiality in our interaction with the clients.
Okay, that's great. So the things that have really come up is over and over is safety and what you just said, Betty, which is compassion and confidentiality. And so it determining screening is like anything. So getting to know anybody new in a context, it takes a while to be like, okay, do you have this to be able to help us out? So I put in here is the typical reasons, which is again relies to that. Safety seemed to be the number one from what everybody said. And part of that is risk management. And the risk management is ensuring the safety, as those said, for like Tracy did for Meals on Wheels, which is because to protect the people who you're serving, who are vulnerable, older within different populations who require support and ensuring their physical safety. Another thing, and while some people might say it's different, compassion is definitely a skill. So that's definitely a way of doing it, type of skills assessment. Like, do they have the right approach? Or even as Sandra said, the right motivation to what they're doing. And ultimately, one of the main reasons is to reduce the liability for everybody involved. So that includes the volunteer themselves, as well as your organization. So another thing when I asked, who is this for and why are you doing it? I was noodling a little bit of nobody fell into the trap I was trying to put in there. You're all too smart for that. But it was very much of like, is it for your organization? Is it for who you serve? Or is it for the volunteer themselves? And so this, I would say, is always hand in hand. It is all of those aspects and all of those people combined. So I like to say that it doesn't only benefit your organization, it also benefits your potential volunteer, the person who is part of the screening process. And if there's any point of that screening that they might realize, just like you might, that they might not be the right candidate or fit. And this can happen very quickly. And it allows for, this is something that it's a co-evaluation. So as while we think that we are evaluating our potential volunteer, they are also evaluating us. So this is something to remember, that how you approach screening, if you explain your whys, they are allowed to buy into your organization's mission. And this, like every part of that volunteer cycle, not just what you are managing, but also what is experienced by the volunteer, is it sets the whole tone for their volunteer experience. So if they feel involved and they understand the why behind your screening, then they're more likely to both complete the screening and feel more motivated to get it done. So when we think of, I was asking for the organizational perspective of why we do it. So again, safety, skills aligned. It can also be a bit of like, I like how Sandra said, motivation is important. And motivation can be a hard thing to measure, especially early on, but a motivation is also to get it done. So from the other side of the volunteer experience of why screening can be something that allows them to see, it allows them to even judge, even though they might not be doing so explicitly, their own level of interest and if their values are aligned with what you are presenting. So if you say, if you're explaining to them why you need a vulnerable sector check and it's something they might bristle at, if you explain why, it might be something they're more willing to participate in. Another part, hopefully this is part of the application process, but that you might only find out, oh, we only have Wednesday shifts available and they have a class on Wednesday, or another commitment. It might be a way of seeing that the timelines aren't aligned. And again, if it is clearly stated for the why and the mission of your organization is stated throughout, it allows really for them to become also an ambassador for your organization, to have that connection with a community organization, and to even, without giving too much to it, that idea of fulfillment by supporting others. And as I put in the other slide as well. There's no failure in somebody opting out at any step in their volunteer journey before they become committed or after they do commit to become a volunteer with you. Having elegant off-ramps, which still preserve everybody's dignity and respect if they feel it is not the right fit for them, is also a way of building in care for the people who are going to be assisting you in showing care to others. So what are the steps? So again, I told you I'd be asking a lot of questions. So you shared some other things that we had. Tracy, you shared that you do criminal record check, vulnerable sector check, something of checking their license. What are other things that people do? We had Sammy who shared about how you have more of a almost like community care approach where somebody's vouching for somebody else. What are things that you do as part of your screening, and what are things that you wish you could do? Again, you can speak up or put it in the chat.
So one of the first things I do before in my application program is I have an interview, whether it be via telephone or whatever medium the potential volunteer likes. And I mean, I interviewed people for jobs in my previous life, so I have a lot of experience in interviewing. You can usually get a feel for someone from that initial interview. But part of the last part of the screening process, we actually send them on a live run with one of our experienced volunteers. And that's more what you said about, is it really right for the volunteer? Are we the right organization for them? Do they fit with us, and do we fit for them? So they actually go out on a delivery and see, okay, this is really what you're going to be doing, and talking to clients and delivering the meals to the clients. And I always ask them when they come back, what did you think? How was this for you? And they still have that opportunity to back out or change their mind.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. So it's like almost like they get a simulation, get to try out a shift before they commit.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. Is anybody else like to share anything? So interviews, we talked about, different versions of police checks, people vouching for each other, a trial shift. Is there anything else that people do as part of their screening?
Well, in our food bank, we're all volunteers. There's no staff at all, 100% volunteers. So we've been pretty open to anybody who wanted to volunteer. And even sometimes we even accepted the clients who would like to volunteer. And because, we felt that it would give them some dignity and stuff like that. But we have run into some issues when we do that. So that's why Betty and I are attending this so that we get some takeaways to see. We had to have more structured way to bring in volunteers to the organization. Even and I think most of the volunteers we have are all the volunteers we have there are pretty well there for the right reason. They've been, they love what they're doing, and they want to, give some time to the community and that kind of stuff. And so we figure that maybe we should have a little more formal structure before we take on more volunteers.
That's smart.
At large, yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Yeah, I think there's different ways to go get about it. And here are some things. So the typical even screening, it seems like you're doing great, Sammy and Betty with a fully volunteer run organization. So the standard steps, so again, there's interview, skills assessment, when required, a police check, references. One thing also is like an application review. And so even by reviewing the actual application, that is a part of your screening as well. So not to forget that the work that you're doing to ensure like, okay, is this even a complete application? Did they apply to your organization but use another organization's name in it? You know, did they apply to the right place? If you are a local organization, did they use a Toronto address, but didn't mention if they live there or not? So there's different ways of checking, be like, okay, did they apply to the right place? Are we who they want to be involved with? So now we're going to be going through, because we're speaking about overreach today, of when all of these screening steps, if they're necessary or not. So again, this will be, I asked you to write down what your organizational values are, and that's for you. And this is for this exercise that you can do yourself. So if you think of when it comes to the internal organizational risk for these 5 main parts of screening. So we have, is it required? Is it a nice to have? Or is it overreach? And I want it to be very clear that these are different for every organization and even at different eras of your organization's life cycle. And so if you think for you that an application review, like I would view that as a requirement, but you know, how do you feel about that one at a different time? Is it required, nice to have, overreach? An interview, a skills assessment, a police check, and checking references. So I'll give you all a minute here to think about these 5 steps for yourself and for your own organization. And again, this can change for different roles, and this can change for different seasons of your organization. So what you're answering now is not a definitive answer, it's just for yourself. Okay. I'll go to the other one. So this is your organizational values with your screening. And then from a volunteer experience perspective, is it going to be different from an organization perspective? And is it going to be different from a potential volunteer's perspective? How do you think that your volunteer screening as it currently stands, how would that experience be? You know, when it comes to your organization values, what do you want to live as the values of your organization? When it comes to a volunteer, what might feel like overreach to them? Or what is a nice to have for them? And again, thinking of all of these steps of who you attract, because not every part of this is necessary for different organizations.
Yeah, we have some comments in the chat.
Okay.
So
Thank you
for
so
one,
much.
Sam says for us, reference checks would work the best. So that
Okay, we'll get more to that. So that works well. We'll talk a bit. So reference checks, again, you and Betty spoke really eloquently about having that like community care approach to by reference checks. It seemed like it's always checking in with somebody else that they know. So it's almost a community check-in rather than other things. So we'll go more into this. This is just for you to think about this for yourself. So again, this is for all of you to consider. What if the values of what is overreach, what is required, and what's a nice to have, what if it doesn't match when it comes to the volunteer experience and to your organizational needs? So we will take some time to evaluate that. So really when it comes to determining overreach and what that even means when it comes to screening. So do you see or do you feel a difference in approach when it comes to your organizational needs and your volunteer experience? Think about the values that you listed for yourself. Do they align with your approach to your screening? And does a path forward and a change seem possible? I'll say that with this group, we're quite small. Everybody seems very committed to community values and for safety. But the one question I think that I would like to discuss just for a minute here, is there one thing in your volunteer screening that you want to change to enhance your volunteer program and experience. Is there anything, before I go, I'm going to have a breakdown of each of these steps and when they might not be overreached, but is there anything so far that you might want to change or shift? We've only been together for 35 minutes, so you might not. Okay, so I'm having no answers so far, but that's totally fine. So when it comes to, we'll do a breakdown of each of like what are the evaluation from your organization perspective and from the volunteer experience perspective from all of those 5 steps I mentioned. So when it comes to reviewing an application, you can review that application if there is a formal application or not, and ensure that you have all the information that you need. You might even realize immediately if you have an age minimum requirement, if you need somebody who's 18 plus, if you need somebody who's this or that, it might reveal to you immediately that they might not be the right fit. If you have a language requirement, if you have a skill requirement that they don't reach, at that point, you wouldn't do any more of the screening, you would just follow up with them. But from their experience, it'll be how easy was that for them to fill out? How easy was it for them to find? And what information were they given when they did apply? Did they know how long the timeline would be after application and until hearing from you again? Did you give them that communication to frame that application experience? So, a risk factor might be if you can only reply to email applications every 2 weeks, and they expected to hear back in 72 hours, but that wasn't part of your automatic reply, that'll cause a lack of interest to you happen. Just like a lack of information will make it hard for you to follow up with a potential volunteer. So I view like understanding the application review, I don't think this is not overreach, but it's still a very important step to consider as essential part of your screening. So an interview, so some people mentioned doing interviews, having a chat. Is this required or not? I would say depends on how hands-on, how big your volunteer team is. Is it a highly engaged role? Is it a leadership role? And again, if you're thinking of this as like a risk assessment from your organization perspective, if you're a very small volunteer team, for example, there's just 5 of you, you want to ensure you might have the capacity to do an interview if there's even a lot of you and you have more staff. And again, when it comes to do you say in the application that an interview is required, like ensuring that for the volunteer experience, letting them know that if you need to do an interview, that's required. And so I put here that it's necessary for highly engaged roles and essential for public-facing roles. And I also give my perspective. I've worked on, as Heather mentioned in my introduction, I've worked on some very large-scale events with both hundreds or if thousands of volunteers. And we made part of our risk assessment, and part of the risk assessment is also like the time and capacity you have, that we determined that we only had explicit interviews at that time if it was a one-off event or a big ongoing one, that we only did it for leadership volunteers. Because if you're going from 0 to 200 volunteers in a very short period of time, you don't have the time, and they'll be volunteering for a short period of time. I didn't have the time, for example, with Nocturne to do 200 interviews. So it would be a review of their application and ensuring that they attended training. So it really depends on the scale, and if you're looking for an ongoing commitment, this is the place to do it. Skills assessment, this sometimes is also part of the interview, sometimes not. This can be when it's really, really required. We had Tracy who mentioned for Meals on Wheels how people have to prove, probably, I'm sure you have to do a license, a test of not a test, not a driving test, I'm sorry. I'm sure there's something you can get from the government to say what is the status of their driver's license.
We actually take a copy.
Oh,
We
you
actually
take
take a copy of their driver's license. We ask that they inform at least their insurance company that they're going to be driving as a volunteer.
Okay, great. Yes. And do they have to fill out a form where they get it from, I think it's a government thing that they share how many accidents they've had? Do you do that for them?
I don't have that one. No, because
Okay.
basically, if they're having accidents, the only part of the clients that it affects is their meal. So
Okay,
they're not
right. So the
driving the
physical
clients. I would
safety, they're not interesting. Yes,
exactly.
that's a good point. I would say so. Yeah, that might be different if you have to drive people. Also, if it's an organization, well, no one here has a sports organization. It's also like making sure you have the skills that you say you do for very specific roles. Like, do you have your coaching qualifications? Language is a really big one. I've worked in organizations where we had like certain roles had a language requirement. So that might be a secondary test that was set up for them. Or if it was a French speaker or a Spanish speaker, you can add that onto your original interview and combine them. So ensuring that they have the skills that they say they do or is really important. Again, while I'm putting under the volunteer experience, it's about slowing things down, but really where the frustration can come is if it's repeated information from the interview that could have all been combined in one. And the risk is if this is not explained that it's a separate step, could cause frustration. But I would say that this one, likely not an overstep, but determining if it's required or not would be an overstep. So, if it's somebody who does not, I'm glad that we brought up that, for example, Tracy, I was assuming you had to get the form to share if they had accidents or not, but you're right, that would be an overstep because there are not clients getting into their cars. Now,
Yeah,
this is the big one.
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's determining, it seems like you already have that evaluation going on. So this one I'm going to spend a bit more time on, which is police check. And this is everything from criminal record check to vulnerable sector check. We'll be speaking about all of those. This might be necessary for roles where they'll be working directly with youth and vulnerable groups. I put necessary as there might be liability insurance, depending on who will be shared, that will be shared with. It's also protect your volunteers. Is it your program participants? Is it the volunteers themselves? Determining on what it can be. So this one really is when it comes to what can be potentially intrusive. And this again is a question that you can ask yourself. Every organization makes a different one. And there is the other layer that it might be a slower aspect as it's harder to access in rural areas. And there's a question if you'll get the slides after the workshop. Not all the slides, but I can create a resume of the main points. So these are different types of police checks. So there's the sometimes called a police check. There's the vulnerable sector check, which goes into if there is anything that's happened with vulnerable populations, particularly children. There's the enhanced police information check. Excuse me. Child abuse registry check. So these are different words and language and also different types of checks as well. And have different level of information that they reveal or share. So there are these places I would say that are very easily determined as when it is considered an overreach. Youth volunteers. So something to keep in mind about all of those types of checks, if it is a vulnerable sector check, if it is a police check, no matter what it is only valid from the moment that it is completed. It does not give you information after that moment. It only gives you what happened until it was, acquired for you. Youth volunteers, it only starts when somebody's 18. So this does not apply. It's not something that you even can request of somebody who's under 18 years old. And also, it only includes information for when people have been a resident of a country. So for newcomers, it will not show anything that's happened anywhere else. And I will be putting, this is a bit of my own opinion, but if you are not interacting with vulnerable populations, if you're not interacting with children, if you're not interacting with even money or anything of that, but it is the role, it does not interact with any of that, do you really need it? That's a question you need to ask. And is this something you want to put time and money towards to be getting? So Sandra asked, what is the definition of overreach? That is ultimately like what is going too far when it comes to doing screening. So what is the appropriate amount of information that you're collecting? I would say overreach is going beyond the amount of appropriate information that you've collected on a volunteer, or the appropriate amount of information that you're asking them to share. I hope everyone agrees to that. So again, the types of volunteer programs you have will determine what is either an overreach or what is required.
Alex, could I ask a question? Just
Yeah.
because I've had something odd come up. So I had a recent volunteer, hypothetically we'll say, that had an old 34 years ago charge on the crim check. Okay. It was an assault charge that happened from a fisticuffs fight with someone else when my volunteer was like 20. So to me, that's a bit like, to exclude that volunteer would be overreach in my mind. Thoughts?
Yes, I would say that that's really you know, every
And
organization.
if I could state, the record's been spotless since. And this person volunteers with other organizations, has coached hockey, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah, I think it's part of it is also determining for yourself, right? You know, I would not, for example, think that that would be somebody who should be involved in maybe like the survivors of abuse group that is here.
right.
But that's really part of like, you know, your own assessment of, is that something that is going to impact their role in that space? You know, like
Right.
if it was a DUI, you might feel differently. Like there's so many things that you have to
Right.
have that as part of yours. And even, I didn't really put this in here presentation, but having that as part of your, if you have a formal volunteer policy of how you evaluate different aspects of that. Like how do you evaluate the old charges that are older than a certain amount of years? So that's really for
Right.
you and your organization to determine. I would say that, you know, the police check revealed something. If they did not tell you about that, most people, in my experience, when you have to do, you've determined that you're doing a police check and they know something is going to be on their record, they will typically share it with you.
Yeah, and it
If they
happened
did,
so long ago that the volunteer completely forgot about it. You know, like it was in 1992. So,
yeah, I
you
think
know,
time doesn't always shouldn't always be the determinant for
right.
somebody's engaged or not. And Sandra wrote, yeah, that's again part of your own assessment, and checks can be a tool as part of the overall. So
Right.
that can be part of it. And also if you do references, you could determine, you know, the attitude that they showed in the interview, or how their application was written. And then again, for checking references from other volunteer opportunities, like that would be a way for you to determine if that is the right fit for your organization or not.
Right.
I don't think
Which
it's
I
that
did.
necessarily, yeah. So I think it's not necessarily going to be part of your, the time isn't the thing that determines it for you.
Yeah, and
But
I'm sharing this for my own, like I said, to get thoughts, but also for anyone else who may find themselves in this situation. In that
yes,
I did because when the person brought in the criminal check and said, listen, if you want an explanation, and I said, absolutely, let's go in the other room, and we had a chat about it. So it was all explained, what had happened and what led to it, and et cetera, et cetera. And I went to my board with it, and the board requested additional references, which I got. And we've been going through the process and just trying to find our way through it. So
Yeah, I think that's an appropriate way that you're looking at. And I think that really goes in well to what I shared here, which is sometimes police checks are barrier. I think in this sense that the person opened up and when they brought it in that they shared, I could share an explanation and that you decide to add another layer to their screening is absolutely the appropriate way to respond.
perfect. Thank you for your feedback.
Absolutely. So when police checks can be a barrier, sometimes as Tracy shared, they can reveal things that, volunteer might have forgotten, and or whatever it is. Police checks, vulnerable sector checks still require a few things, which is one, it requires language fluency, which again, if you're looking people with different language skills, English might not be their first language, digital skills, if you're doing it on My Back Check or other aspects, knowledge how to navigate those websites, or even a level of comfort to go in a police or RCMP station. So there's a lot of assumptions that might be built in there that might make it a barrier for those people to be able to do this. Another major barrier is there's a lot of populations that have been over-policed. And while the statistic I shared here, I'm not sure if I have it in parentheses, that things that can come up is like 30% of like nonviolent crimes are theft with a value of less than $5,000. And most of those might be theft of not a lot of money. So when people are, when these thefts happen, less than $5,000, that's, people just trying to typically keep up with their daily expenses. And that limits people when it comes to police checks, right? So there's overpolicing in certain neighborhoods that typically are the neighborhoods where those choices might be made. And there's a lot of people who do not trust the criminal justice system for a myriad of very legitimate reasons. So these can create barriers to people wanting to volunteer or wanting to be engaged. So there can be different methods that we take this in for. Okay, I already have, maybe I have a double one there. Oh, why is it going in the wrong direction? Okay, alternatives. Maybe I have had some doubles in there. I'm sorry, everybody. Oh, there's somebody drawing all on top of my slides. That's you, Heather. So if you wish to have a different approach, and we have had some people here in this group who have mentioned about doing more of a community check-in and people vouching for others. There's some few different alternatives that you can put this in. This could be part of your policy. Again, that's why I asked you to write down your values of your organization. What are the ways that you're approaching not only the people who are supporting your programs, but also those who are coming in to support those programs? Like, what are the values that you're giving everybody? So if it is, justice, if it's accessibility, you might question, okay, why is a police check required? I know there's some larger organizations where it's part of their liability insurance, and some of those things you can't get around, for example, at hospitals. So for self-disclosure, so these are just a few different ideas of alternatives to police checks. And is this what I'm telling you to do? I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm just giving you alternatives of when it might be overreach. of also remember police checks take time, they take money, and if you're not paying for them, you're requesting your volunteer take on that cost. So self-disclosure, this can happen in an interview process of asking people if they've ever been involved in a crime that you have to be aware of, structured interviews. This can really be an opportunity to share both about skills and also let them know that the safety of your clients, for example, or program attendees is essential. And this can also raise inclusivity, as I was saying. And again, thank you to Tracy for sharing what happened. And I think that this last one is good to have no matter if you do have police checks or not, because having a police check and having a clear criminal record check and a vulnerable sector check does not mean that people approach all issues with care and thoughtfulness. So that is a reminder as well that having safety and behavior expectations of your volunteers as well as your staff to be clear around every step of the way. So again, a police check does not mean that there's somebody who's going to approach everything with care as well. So just to keep that in mind of, again, what are the values that you wish to the person to bring into your space because of the values that you bring forth in how you run your program and what your organization is.
I wonder if this would be a good time to have a break. What do you think?
Sure. All right, most people are back.
Yep.
Great. So I just want to be clear. Again, having a police check, criminal record check is not always an overreach. It can be, but these are alternatives so that there is not overreach if that might be it. So there's references. This is like the last one that I listed as a potential part of the screening process. As I listed, this can also be an alternative to police checks, as it can be a check-in with other people who know them. But again, at the same time, it can also be an overreach if you do all the other things. If you've done an interview, if you've done a skills check, if you've done a police check, do you also need a reference check? Unless legally required to by your liability insurance, is that too much? Again, I'm not here to determine value, judgment or determine your values. This is really for you to determine when it comes to the time and the effort and the actual outcomes that you're getting from every step of your screening process. So what is like the outcomes of these processes? So you might find out from other organizations that they volunteer with, you can confirm reliability, all those things. And again, references this is the only step of part of your screening process, much like, oh, I have an incomplete sentence there. Sorry. I was going to put volunteers, newcomers, and people who are new to volunteering or are new to the workforce for whatever reason. They might have been out of volunteering and out of the workforce for a long time, so they might not have references other than friends or family. So this might be a limiting factor for some people. Not saying that friends and family are not good references, but can also be determined of what you're looking for. So I think it's really when it comes to an overall package or a basket of your screening processes, it can be overreach if you're doing absolutely everything. So do you need to do absolutely everything? So when screening is necessary and what is overreach? So again, there's the questions you can ask yourself. You can determine a matrix. It can be, is this necessary? Is it just the way it's always been done? So you're allowed to sit with, do a reevaluation of your program, of being like, oh, maybe this was necessary. Our program values have shifted. Who we are serving has shifted. You know, if the program initially started for youth and now it's for adults, maybe you don't need different aspects either. Is it benefiting your program? Is it protecting the potential volunteer? These are all questions you can ask yourself. So, and when's the last time anything changed? Has your program remained absolutely the same for the past 10 years? What do you need to determine as a change, right? Maybe your matrix of what is a risk, what is not a risk, has also changed over that time. Also determining I talked about organizing volunteers and recruiting volunteers for very large scale events. What you're able to do when you have hundreds or thousands of people for a one-off event is very different than if you're hoping to maintain a very steady, let's say like 20 to 50 group of people who volunteer consistently over a long period of time. It's a very different approach that you would take. So as for why I asked you to think about your values, of really sit in those values and consider how you might want to shift after that. Get the support. If you want to change anything, get support from, if you have other departments, there's other departments there, but we have a lot of volunteer-run organizations. That just might mean your fellow volunteers have a chat, have an idea of even like, why do we do this? Who does it benefit? So even a conversation like that can really help you find out, and getting feedback from your current volunteers, being like, what was your screening process like? So if you brought on a bunch of new volunteers, ask them about the application, screening, and training process can lead to improvement of those processes as well, and make you understand what it was like, not only from an organization perspective, but for them. Some people are more willing to share than others. And also keep in mind, it's always people who are either frustrated with the experience you might hear more from. So it all depends on that. So collaboration is key. So determine your how, if you are going to make any changes. If you have redetermined that, make sure it's aligned with your vision and your values, and you can do a self-evaluation, see if there's any changes you can make easily. Small shifts can lead to a bunch of things. Even if you have an interview, if you get feedback that one of the questions was intrusive, or you realize there's too many questions, like ensuring that you're asking pertinent information and that you're only getting the information that's required and that is actually supporting to make sure you have the right volunteer and supporting your program. You might, again, for large organizations, you might need buy-in. If you're small, you can make some of these shifts very quickly. Yeah, so biggest risks of overreach. So again, if people are frustrated by any part of the process, and if it takes a long time, and if they have to be the ones who get there, and again, I'm not saying I'm for or against police checks, it's just that they take time and money, so you have to really determine if it's necessary. And again, if depending on the roles that people are applying to, so if somebody is an event volunteer, it'll be very different than if they're a volunteer for your working with, children program. It's making it tailored to the roles is a great way to avoid this. So having like clear expectations that, your screening process might be longer if you are a volunteer with a program that serves children, or it might be shorter for your events only, but it means that you can only do certain things. So really making sure that your communication touches on all of these things during the whole process of getting somebody from applying to actually showing up for the first shift. So we have here, again, how long should screening actually take? This is a big question. Again, determines about what your organization is, how quickly you can do turnaround. I found that some very large scale places, I brought up the hospital again. I know some people who work in volunteering for there. The process is very long because they have their liabilities, there's different things, but it is a place that people might typically move towards volunteering if they're new to it. So if there's no clarity, if it's just like they apply and they just wait and wait and wait, it can lead to lack of interest. And that can lead to loss of engagement. You might have lost an ambassador for your program. Now, most folks here, from what you did share, it seems like you're more community-based in scale, and seems like you have like less than 10 staff. If I'm wrong in that evaluation, please let me know. But those can move a lot more fluidly, and you can make changes a lot more quickly rather than if you're part of a really massive organization. So part of screening also is figuring out that there's the capacity in both your volunteer program and trust in the volunteer and trust that they will tell you what you need to know. So creating a positive volunteer experience is from their first moment. So screening is part of that as well. And I've said it multiple times, expectations, having clear expectations and communications about how many steps there are will lead to less frustrations. So even deadlines, if they have to do an interview, be like, you must complete it within the next X amount of weeks. Or not must, be like, we highly encourage you to sign up for a slot within X amount of weeks. And also clear of other volunteers. It's like, how quickly are you going to do it if you're a volunteer-run organization, like what Sam and Betty are from? That can put different constraints on timelines as well. Yes, so this is when it comes to elements that you can even hold to accountability. Is it part of your internal policy, what you do for screening? If it's not, why isn't it? And do you have a risk matrix for that? And one thing that Tracy brought up before is ensuring for issues, even if there are issues that come up, if people reveal from self-disclosure or anything along the way of being like, there's a record for XYZ reason, ensuring that's documented in a way that shows that person dignity, not having it on a public drive if you use that, having it be protected information, but ensuring that it is still documented if needed. And that way it avoids any future conflicts. And by that conflict, I can mean it's not necessarily with person to person. It might also be either volunteer or staff turnover. So if you're not the person, you might be holding this information, but you leave the organization, you have to be able to share that with dignity and care to the next person who's coming in who is caring for that volunteer program. So again, focus on why, collaborate with other people, determine how you're going to make any changes, make sure you're consistent in your communication. This will all make things way easier when it comes to if you're going to change, if any steps in your screening process are overreach. What else did I have? Oh, thank you for listening. There you go.